listening to the Digitally Irresistible podcast, where we cover the optimization of digital technologies and irresistible people. Brought to you by iCore. Each episode features someone who sheds a little more light on the ins and outs of delivering a great employee and customer experience that has a measurable impact on the business. And now, here's today's guest. Welcome to another episode of the Digitally Irresistible podcast. I'm your host, Bernie Borges. Today's guest is Mark Honeycutt. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Bernie. Thanks for having me. How's your summer going?
Summer is going great, even with these thunderstorms. It's happening literally right now as we record.
Well, why does summer always go so fast? It's precious time here, especially for those who live up in the north.
Yes, exactly. And you're in the Pacific Northwest, where you probably get a little bit warmer weather this time of year than normal, right?
Exactly. Those days are precious. They are.
Exactly. Well, Mark, I'm excited about our conversation today. You have more than 25 years of a track record creating great customer experiences at iconic brands such as Amazon and Microsoft. And currently, Mark, you advise companies on how to harness the right mix of digital customer experience and live agent support. So on this episode, Mark, let's unpack the dynamics and the best practices on the integration of automation in customer support to meet the needs of today's customer. But first, Mark, let's begin with your backstory. Tell us your backstory.
Yeah, as you noted, I've been in the industry a long while, and it's a passion. I love the idea of working with customers, and there's nothing quite like that when you architect solutions that deliver great customer experiences. In my career, which has really been my life's work, I've been able to work across technology. I've been able to work across retail and services businesses, both internal as well as outsourced solutions on a global scale. I've had the great privilege to work in and manage operations in over 30 different countries around the globe. And I think I've been in the industry so long that I've had a chance to see some of the major waves that have happened. It began in the late 90s and the early 2000s, where we first started using third-party companies, or BPOs, as we'd say today, to deliver customer experience. Then there was the offshoring wave. And so really excited about some of the new capabilities with the advent of technology, specifically generative AI, and some of the customer experiences companies can create. So I'm looking forward to talking about that today with you.
Fantastic. Well, why don't we begin our conversation with the following question, Mark. With your storied background, with such wonderful and relevant experience, tell us, how is the customer support landscape changing, and what does it mean for today's customer care leaders?
Yeah, it's what I call the third wave of customer care. I mentioned previously, whether it was using third parties, whether it was the offshoring opportunities, and now it's really the advancements in technology, and more specifically, the conversational AI. And if you think about the future, in the near term, AI will be engaged in every contact with the customer. But I think it's also important, as we've gone through the waves, one of the things that's really important when you go through these big changes, and you can get consumed by, we've got to do this, we have to do that. Also start with what's not going to change. And so I've always had a philosophy. If you think about what we're talking about with conversational AI and how you move from what was traditionally handled by an agent to technology, well, what's not going to change? From the customer perspective, they still want their issue resolved at the lowest level possible, as quickly as possible, and they want to be treated with value and respect. So you have to think about that translation from the customer perspective. I also think we're going to have agents Agents exist today. They're going to exist tomorrow. They're just going to be better with the supplement of artificial intelligence. So what's changing? Technology has always played a big role for us customer care professionals in delivering the customer experience. Where it's changing now is you're going to see the technology have more direct conversations with the customer. So you've got to think about, and I'm going to call it automation because everybody says AI, but I think of this in two fronts for the customer care professional. One is a bot, where it's fully the customer contact engagement is fully managed through technology. But the other is what I alluded to just a few moments ago, was how do we help reduce agent cognitive load, increase compliance, decrease the dispersion of handle time? That's agent assistance. And so the biggest thing that's going to be really important as either companies who've begun the journey or are now embarking on how do we take that automation to the next level, be planful. Think through what are the right technologies. How do I want it to engage with the customer? How much friction do I want to apply through those technological solutions or the bot before we exit to an agent? Another key element is I read this report recently, and it's saying 58% of all customer engagements are multi-channel or omni-channel, as you would hear in the industry. So you have to think it's not just my text-based solutions, it's my voice-based solutions. So think about that customer experience in totality. And that's where it's really important, especially when you're talking about customer satisfaction.
At iCore, we're not just staying ahead of the curve, we're defining it. Our technology infrastructure is more than cutting edge. It's flexible, strong, and designed to tackle challenges head-on. Whether it's adapting to intricate client needs or pioneering new solutions in AI, iCore's commitment to harnessing technology in support of our clients is evident in everything we do. We're all about turning what seem like challenges into opportunities and setting the standards for the BPO industry. Welcome to iCore, where superior technology and proactive innovation are in our DNA.
So, Mark, what I heard you say is that what hasn't changed is that the customer still needs to be the focus. The customer care leader needs to really focus on the bottom line of resolving the customer's issue, doing it expeditiously and with respect. What is changing is the use of technology. And I think I'm hearing you say that customer care leaders need to be thinking about a technology-first approach, but still focused on the bottom line of customer issue resolution. So where I want to go next is, if you look at the current landscape of technology-enabled support, what are the key metrics that customer care leaders need to be managing?
Well, I think along a similar theme that I was talking about earlier, a lot of the metrics you're going to use in a technology space are very similar, certainly in what they're attempting to measure in the automation space or the AI space. So the names may be different. Okay. You're going to hear about things like containment rate. Well, containment is essentially bot exclusively handled the engagement. It didn't transfer to an agent. A lot of companies will add the customer didn't re-engage through other support channels within X period of time. Well, that's similar to what we would call first contact resolution or issue resolution when an agent handles that. You're going to hear about some new areas where when a customer's in the workflow, what are their fallout rates? What are their dropout rates? Well, that is akin to, say, when a customer abandons a call. And so they're similar in their meaning, in their measurement, and make sure, again, as I mentioned just a moment ago, think about it in totality. You have to think about that in concert with if, say, a customer is falling out in the bot, well, how does that compare to my abandonment rates when we're in the agent assisted type support environment as well? So don't overcomplicate it. Look at it in totality. Some other elements that you want to take a look at is look at the cost structure in total as well. So what does it cost to handle through a bot? How about where we start with a bot and exit to an agent? Or what a lot of companies already have, what's the cost to serve for an agent engagement? Now, on the agent assist side, where we're enabling and scripting and providing support resources for the agent, you're going to want to look at a couple of things, such as velocity to proficiency or agent proficiency. You're going to want to look at average handle time. You want to look at the dispersion of handle time. Is it getting less, meaning your standard deviation, and so forth? So your total handle time may stay the same, but you may see improvements in the dispersion from the best to the worst handle times.
What about things like concurrency?
Concurrency isn't as important, let's say, when you're using a straight bot engagement. When you're on the agent side, though, and you think about some of the agent assist capabilities, you want to make sure that they're able to deliver the customer experience, right, when they're handling multiple accounts. And that's where some of the agent assistant scripting technology, some of the nudging or the cues can help when an agent's handling multiple engagements simultaneously.
Okay. And of course, voice is still a significant part of support, right? So how does a customer care leader integrate measurement when they're also measuring voice?
Well, when I think about voice, or when I talk about the customer totality, well, a customer may want to chat with you. A customer may want to call you. You have to look at those interchangeably, particularly when it comes to automation. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, with the number of contacts now that are actually becoming multi-channel. Think about it. Customer calls in, and you may follow up through an SMS. You may follow up through an email channel. Those are contacts where you have to think about omni-channel or multi-channel capabilities. When you're offering voice today, it still is the largest contact medium. Most companies that offer voice, it's well over 50% of the contacts. And so don't lose sight when you're thinking about your automation strategies to include voice as well as text. Text is easier when you start this path. The challenge when you have a voice conversation, you have dialect issues, you have background issues, you have line quality issues that you have to factor. But yet customers, I always looked at it as customers get to choose how they want to engage. I may steer them in a certain way, but we want to meet the needs with how they want to engage with us as an organization.
Okay. So you've outlined a really good framework for what customer care leaders really need to be thinking about, including measurement. Let's drill down a little further, Mark. Let's talk about the how. How can care leaders use technology to be driving customer issue resolution?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with one of the challenges with this wave, Bernie. If you look at the operations leaders, they are experts in how to manage the customer experience. They know how to execute the operations in call centers. They know how to engage with their agents to then deliver a terrific customer experience back to the customers. But then you need the technology side. They may not be versed. They're certainly aware. They're getting questions from their leadership on how are you deploying these new technologies. ChatGPT changed the world in a very quick way for those of us on the call center operations side of the house. And so I think the operators know what they want. They know how they want to implement this within the business. But now you need your technology side. And I don't know about you, but I never worked with a technology team that said, I don't have enough to do.
Right.
They always have
kind of the opposite
backlog
of
that. Measured in months, sometimes years.
Yep.
Then you had these new requirements, whether it's out-of-date code, whether it's security requirements, whether it's federal regulation. So they had this tech deficit that had very tight timelines. And so that's the challenge, that now you add, hey, let's really take the customer experience to the next level using some of these capabilities. And so you've kind of got this dynamic between the call center operators and the tech team of how do we approach this? So a couple of things. First of all, when you think about the approach for automation, I call it the continuous cycle. And there's three main parts. There's analytics, there's development and test, and then there's your post-deployment measurement and efficiency and efficacy. So let's go back. Analytics. You're taking, again, what was done traditionally by an agent with human intellect. So you just had to work in high-level flows. Here, you need to build each of those steps. And so this is where you have the analytics that start with what are your major contact drivers? What are the various elements off of those workflows that need to be created? That leads then to the development side of the house, step 2, where you're creating the roadmap, you're creating your development plan, and then ultimately testing before you offer it publicly. But don't lose sight of the third step as well, which is now I'm measuring when the workflows, the automation is out. Is it achieving some of the things that I identified in the first element? We talked previously about where's your customer fallout. Well, customers abandon bots. Why? Mm-hmm. And then you're faced with the challenge of, do I build out the efficacy, meaning the capabilities of that workflow, or do I move on to the next major contact driver? So that's the efficacy. How deep do you go in the workflow? And then the efficiency of moving on to the next. What is the total amount that I put through either automation of my engagements? And so I think it's really important to think through those three elements. Now, there's another element that I talk about, being planful about how you're thinking about deploying automation. One of the things that I've seen, and this goes back into the theme of the thinking about the totality experience of your customers who engage you. One thing that I've seen in some companies is they look at the two engagements differently. If it's through automation, they generally use what I call customer behavior metrics, meaning customer came in through the bot, didn't exit to an agent, and didn't contact us back in. If the answer to both those questions is yes, then it was good. Satisfaction achieved. But then you look at the agent side, and you've got all this metric around net promoter, you have average handle time, you have, as I mentioned, around communication. Well, if we're trying to take what was done by the agent previously through a bot, have the same customer satisfaction measurements as well, or success measurements between the two, because that's where you get true insight.
What about a practical example, Mark? What's a practical example of how customer care leaders can deploy a model that is leveraging more automation and driving cost-effective issue resolution?
Yeah, I think a couple. Let me give you a general use in my experience that I used with one of my larger operations. I am a big believer in speech analytics for numerous reasons outside of the automation perspective or the insights. I used it for both QA as well as voice of the customer perspective. Let me give you a couple of quick examples. We had a large offshore population. Well, what's one of the major challenges when you have an offshore population? It's language skills. understandability skills. So we would have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of contacts every day. How do you take that large data set and get down to representative insights and coaching as it pertains to understandability? So we would, on a near-time basis, evaluate those. We were able to get the anecdotes from the customer as well as the agent, meaning the actual contacts, that would go to the manager, and they were able to take and coach the agent in those situations. They didn't have to hunt and peck. They didn't have to listen to 3 calls and make an assessment. No, they could say, here's where we're seeing some understandability issues. And they would play the calls right with the agent there. Another insight, we had deployed some controversial policies. We knew customers were engaging with us. Well, again, we had hundreds of thousands of contacts. How do we take that information out, asking about what customers were saying, and then provide those calls, not varnished at all, not hidden in some report, the actual calls where the customers were commenting on that. It just provides a whole level of insights. Now, let's talk about some other examples how you might use it in say, a membership or a subscription service. Okay. Well, we haven't talked about some of the capabilities for proactive nature. Well, in those types of environments, what's one of the biggest indicators of churn? Is a customer using it? Right? Are they using the service? And so if you think about it, you can take some metadata from whatever your usage system is and say, hey, what if we created some nudging to encourage engagement absent a cancellation call? That's one example of a proactive type of engagement. How about where you're shipping a product? Okay, order status, that's great. You can create a bot. You can say, Bernie, your product's going to be here by X date. Very cool. Now, to go back to what I was talking about, the efficacy, how do you build out that entire workflow? Well, what if now the product's late? Maybe the customer paid for expedited shipping. What are your policies and processes? Do I give a concession? Do I refund the shipping? Do I issue a replacement? Those are the types of things that you can build out through a bot workflow, again, to go to that depth as well. Financial services. There is great metadata around fraud detection. Is this the customer calling in from a location I would expect? Those types of things. Those are very real world examples where you can use AI, you can use automation components to provide a more complete and secure experience for your customers.
So, Mark, I think what I'm hearing, because you began this part of the conversation around the use of speech analytics, but as you explained it, where my mind went is really more around overall interaction analytics, not limited to speech, including speech, but not limited to speech. Is that right?
That's right. You need to look at the customer experience in totality. You're starting to see more and more of those live customer engagements, and it happened previously in self-help as well, starting to work further upstream. But look at that customer experience in totality. One of the philosophies, I have a lot of philosophies as it pertains to customer care, but one of the things I would talk about is ultimately, if you're a customer care professional, the evaluation of our service is subjective, right? And what I mean by that is that at the end of the engagement, the customer on the other end says that was good or it wasn't. If you compare that to some of the other businesses, let's say if you're shipping a product, well, you know when you picked it, you know when it was shipped, was it delivered on time? Those are binary. Ours is subjective. And so that's why I'm saying as much insights and as much consistency between those measures, whether you're dealing with technology or whether you're dealing with the agent, that's going to provide that totality of visibility back to the customer.
Got it. Okay. So then sticking with the theme of how, Mark, how can brands get started or maybe expand? Let's say they're already using some automation. How can they either get started or expand their use of automation in customer support?
Yeah, it's not an easy discussion, Bernie, but uh, one of the things I'd recommend is again, be planful in how you're approaching this up front. Taking some time thinking through how you want the end result to look like can save you a lot of time. Taking a little bit of time, planning those out can help you move much faster on the back end. And so a couple of things that's really important when you're thinking through the plan or the approach. One are your policies. The other is just your philosophies. So let me give you an example of some of those that you want to think through. Well, should you tell a customer that they're engaging with a bot or not? They go through. Another one is how many times do you want the customer, or how long do you want the customer to stay in the bot before they exit to an agent? So this is really important to think through the plan and approach. Now, earlier I mentioned there's three parts to the continuous automation cycle. And so this is where you take an outside in view and you say, well, from a resourcing perspective, do I have the analytics in-house with the bandwidth to deliver? The same thing for development, the same thing for your continuous improvement team, the measurement on step 3. So where you have gaps, then you have to think through, how do I close those?
So yeah, let's unpack that a little bit, because, once you look at your resources, what you need in the way of staff and just overall resources, what are the options? How do brands approach their options?
Yeah, I guess we're operating in steps of 3, but let me give you an example. One is you can reallocate. You can take individuals who have the capability from lower priority projects and assign them to the automation side. You can go back and ask for incremental resources. As an aside, I will say the one thing I don't miss are these types of conversations, Bernie, from my corporate days. But those are all viable options. A third option is you look at third-party solutions like BPOs, like IT and consulting organizations to help advance your automation roadmap. And I personally feel, I think the BPOs, as it pertains to customer experience, are uniquely positioned. They're positioned because they've been building customer experiences, whether it's through the phone switch or through agents, for decades. Now we're translating that. How do you integrate and extend that into the technology perspective? Let me give you a case in point, a real world example that I went through. In one of my roles, we had a large seasonal business. Literally, for a certain time of year, I needed double the staff than I did in my steady state business. And one of the things that we were challenged with is we didn't have a training environment. And so for years, I kept going back to the IT team and I was like, I need this. And it kept falling below the line. And so I started to become frustrated with the challenge. And so I always had a philosophy when I was managing my outsource partners. I had vendors that managed the transactions, but then I had a set that were my partners, and they were designed with strategic testing. But more importantly, the underlying theme was you need to make the network better, not yourselves better, make the network better. And so one of my partners, and iCore, has done the same thing here, and I've seen similar results for some of their clients. But we built, or my partner built, a training environment. We used the 6 most common transactions, and that enabled these seasonal staff to not, for the first time they're talking with a customer, bring together the phone switch, the CRM, the knowledge base, and some of the other tools that we use. Now we were able to do that in a training environment where there's not that anxiety of talking to a customer. In that business, we measured velocity to proficiency. And before we deployed the training environment and after, we saw upwards of a 30% improvement just by that one process approach.
And Mark, I love your distinction between vendors who handle transactions and then those that you called partners who make the network better and truly are partners of yours. So it's a great distinction. It's something that we take a lot of pride in at iCor, as I'm sure you know.
iCor has done some very similar things for some of their clients as well. And interestingly enough, as I've had an opportunity to work and talk with the team here, we saw iCor saw similar results to what I did in my previous role.
Yep. Great. Well, I know that there's more of that coming in other content formats, but this is a conversation that I would love to continue, but we're going to leave it here for today. Again, there'll be more content on this topic coming from iCor, but we're going to leave it here for today. But before we do that, before we sign off, Mark, I think because I've let you know that we have a tradition here on the Digitally Irresistible podcast. Before we let you go, we want to know, what do you like to do for fun when you're not working?
Well, you mean aside from taking care of customers?
Of course.
Oh, okay. Well, I've got three passions in my life that I enjoy with my family. And those who know me, it won't be a surprise. I'm a big sports fan. College football and Major League Baseball are my thing. So usually in the fall, you'll see me tailgating at Husky Stadium on Saturdays. And then my second passion, I love to travel. I've got an RV. I love the lifestyle. And so when I can take sports with my RVing and combine those like tailgating, that's a good day. And I can bring my family along with me. And then, on a day-to-day basis to help keep sanity, I love working out.
Fantastic. Those are all fantastic and enjoyable passions of yours, above and beyond supporting the customer. So, Mark, thank you for sharing them. And Mark, thank you for joining me on this episode of the Digitally Irresistible podcast. This is a big topic, really discussing, as we did today, the dynamics, the best practices on the integration of automation and customer support to meet the needs of today's customers. You've done a fantastic job of outlining what can be a complex topic into a cohesive conversation today. So thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Digitally Irresistible podcast, where we cover the optimization of digital technologies and irresistible people, delivering a great employee and customer experience that has a measurable impact on the business. Brought to you by iCor. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss future episodes.